Всім добрий вечір.
On behalf of the brave, on behalf of every father and every mother who waits for freedom, on behalf of our warriors, and paves the way for a new history.
Hello and welcome to Tochnyi Weekly, the show that gets behind the headlines to discuss the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We have an excellent show for you today. We have a couple of important guests and we're very excited about it. So please, if you could, hit the like button and also subscribe to Tochnyi. Please do hit that like button. It's going to help spread the word about the stream and hopefully get more people to hear all the great stuff that's going to happen. So please also check us out on Twitter and Blue Sky. We also have a website, Tochnyi.info. We have a lot of maps there. We have a lot of research there. So if you want more technical information about some of the stuff we talk about on the stream, it's definitely the place to check out. Now, Erlend, normally I would stop there, but we did a thing. And I wanted to ask you, is the thing out? Can we talk about the thing or should I be quiet now?
The podcast.
Yeah.
So it's out on Spotify. We had a first kind of a topic conversation in a more academic framework, I would say, because we were so lucky that we got a couple of scholars that are doing research on both the war in Ukraine and also unmanned systems as associates to Tochnyi. And we had that last Saturday in our own Discord server, and our video editor has done some amazing job editing that down into a podcast because it was really, really good. And it's out on Spotify and it's coming out on YouTube tomorrow.
Cool. Yeah. So tune in for that on YouTube or check it out on Spotify. We're really excited about it. It was a really interesting talk. I highly recommend people check it out. So that's a good reason to subscribe. You'll get updates like that for extra stuff that we do. And we're going to hope to have many more discussions like that in the future. We think it was a very good discussion. So we have a great show for you today. First, I will be doing my news report as always. That'll be followed by the German aid to Ukraine report from my colleague. That will then be followed by a discussion with our guest Artem, who is an associate at Tochnyi, who has done some incredible research on intercepting drones with other drones, is I think the best way to put it, drone interception. So he'll be discussing that topic. And we'll also be joined by our guest, Jonathan from ATP Geopolitics, the YouTube channel. So we're really excited about that. We've had Jonathan on a few times. He's always a great guest, and he always asks really interesting questions. So he read the article that Artem wrote, and we're excited to talk about Artem's article. And we thought Jonathan would be a good guest to have here to also discuss it with Artem. And so, yeah, we'll try to talk to Jonathan about some other things going on, maybe if we have time. So, yeah, if you guys have any questions in chat during the stream, or if you want to put some chats in the comments, some questions in the comments after you watch, later on, please feel free. We do take your feedback, into account. We do our best to answer questions. So, feel free to, give us feedback or questions. And I think without any further delay, because we got so much going on, I'm going to go ahead and jump right into the news.
These are the main headlines as of March 30th, 2025. First up, we have operational news. Operations at the Kavkazskaya oil transshipment facility in Russia's Krasnodar region have been indefinitely halted following a recent drone strike attributed to Ukrainian forces. The impact of the incident was severe enough that, according to the Russian media outlet RBC, restarting the site anytime soon is considered unfeasible. The Caspian Pipeline Consortium, which manages the site, has begun efforts to repair the damage, but the scale of the disruption has created long-term complications. The incident began on the night of March 19th when a drone strike triggered an explosion at the facility. The blast led to oil tanks, which caused them to lose structural integrity and sparked a significant fire. Local sources reported that just 2 days later, on March 21st, the site may have been targeted again. According to eyewitness accounts, a group of 3 drones struck additional tanks, possibly leading to injuries among emergency responders, some of whom were reportedly transported to hospitals. The Kavkazskaya facility is a vital component of Russia's oil logistics, and it handles the transition of oil from railway delivery systems to the Caspian Pipeline Consortium infrastructure, allowing for continued transport to Novorossiysk, a major export hub for Russia. The transshipment point can manage up to 6 million tons of oil annually and includes a rail terminal connected by a 15.7-kilometer pipeline to the Kropotynskaya pumping station. Ukrzaliznytsia, the Ukrainian railway service, experienced a major digital breach that targeted its online infrastructure, announced by the company on March 24th. The incident was described as both extensive and strategically executed, which caused significant disruption to the organization's digital platforms, including its website and mobile application, which went offline on March 23rd due to what was initially described as a technical malfunction. Restoration efforts are ongoing, with technical teams actively working to bring services back online. Despite the severity of the cyber attack, the company reported that railway operations themselves were not interrupted. Trains continued to run on schedule owing to the pre-established contingency procedures developed in response to previous digital attacks. Ukrainian Railways emphasized that the attack was highly organized and involved multiple layers of intrusion, which were attributed to hostile external actors. In response, cybersecurity experts within the company are coordinating with the security services of Ukraine to recover systems using backup data. While the digital infrastructure is being repaired, online ticketing remains unavailable. Ukrzaliznytsia has shifted to offline ticketing and service operations for the time being. The eVoro chatbot continues to be a valuable tool in Ukraine's defense efforts, receiving hundreds of weekly submissions from citizens despite a decrease in engagement compared to the early months of the full-scale invasion. According to Mikhailo Fedorov, Ukraine's deputy prime minister and the minister of digital transformation, the steady flow of reports show that the platform remains consistently useful even as attempts to disrupt it by opposing forces continue. In an interview with My Ukraina TV, Fedorov emphasized the long-term impact of the tool, noting that over the course of the 3-year invasion, more than 660,000 messages had been submitted by residents, particularly from areas under temporary occupation. These reports have included valuable details about the positioning and movement of opposing troops, defense installations, and military hardware, contributing directly to Ukraine's strategic awareness. Fedorov highlighted the unique structure of the chatbot, which distinguishes it from other platforms by integrating it with the DIA application. This ensures that reports come from verified users, which lends greater confidence in the accuracy and reliability of intelligence. Although the data is anonymized, the identity verification step helps reduce misinformation and confirms that the contributions are coming from Ukrainian citizens rather than hostile actors attempting to spread disinformation. He affirmed that the continued use of the systems demonstrates its effectiveness and its role in supporting military operations. The SBU recently also announced the launch of another Telegram chatbot, which is intended to identify individuals involved in recruiting Ukrainians for destructive acts such as arson. Ukraine's Minister of Defense, Rustem Umerov, has announced a major organizational shift aimed at strengthening the country's military aviation capabilities. A new dedicated aviation command structure is being formed within both the Ministry of Defense and the General Staff, intended to focus solely on expanding and modernizing Ukraine's air power. The effort is geared toward improving existing aerial platforms while also integrating advanced technologies, with the ultimate goal of achieving greater control over the skies. Umerov stated that Ukraine is already operating powerful aircraft such as the American F-16 and French Mirage jets, which marks a significant step in the country's aerial defense development. He emphasized that this progress represents only the beginning of a larger aerial initiative. As part of this strategy, several key leadership appointments were made with the endorsement of the President of Ukraine. Major General Alexei Marchenko was named Deputy Chief of the General Staff. Brigadier General Serhiy Holubtsov was appointed the Deputy Commander of the Air Force, and Colonel Alexander Yakiv was designated as the Commander of Aviation, Deputy Commander of the Air Force. Umerov also announced plans to recommend Alexander Kosenko for the role of Deputy Minister of Defense for Aviation. Kosenko previously served as advisor to the minister, focusing on the integration of Western aircraft into Ukraine's air fleet. His upcoming responsibilities will involve scaling these efforts across the entire military aviation infrastructure, including Ukraine's air defense and offensive operations. The individuals selected for these new leadership roles bring extensive experience and deep institutional knowledge. Major General Marchenko has served in a range of aviation roles for over 3 decades, including leadership positions in reconnaissance, fighter units, and training centers. Brigadier General Holubtsov is also a veteran of fighter aviation, having held numerous command roles and contributed significantly to personnel training and aviation development within the Ukrainian Air Force. Colonel Diakiv, with nearly 30 years of service, has risen through the ranks to command tactical aviation units and has led programs for retraining and developing aviation personnel. South Korea's military has reported a further escalation in North Korea's support for Russia's war in Ukraine, stating that an estimated 3,000 additional North Korean personnel were sent to Russian territory in the early months of this year. This brings the total number of North Korean troops reportedly involved to approximately 14,000 since their involvement began. The reinforcement is believed to have taken place between January and February. According to South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff, a substantial portion of the initial North Korean deployment of 4,000 individuals became casualties during the ongoing war. Alongside personnel, North Korea has reportedly provided a steady stream of military equipment to Russia, including large quantities of short-range ballistic missiles, self-propelled artillery, and multiple rocket systems. Up next, we have economy and aid. France has revealed a new €2 billion military assistance initiative for Ukraine, with a focus on meeting the country's most pressing defense needs amid the ongoing invasion. The announcement was made by French President Emmanuel Macron, detailing a diverse range of support, including missile systems and armored vehicles intended to reinforce Ukraine's military capabilities on multiple fronts. Among the equipment being provided are Milan anti-armor missiles and Mica air-to-air missiles, which are designed for use with Mirage 2000 fighter jets. The Mica missile, known for its versatility, is capable of engaging aerial threats at both short and medium distances. It is designed to counter agile aircraft, including both crewed and uncrewed systems, offering Ukraine enhanced air defense and aerial engagement capability. The aid package also includes Mistral missiles, which provide additional protection against airborne threats, along with armored vehicles such as the VAB and AMX-10RC models. These vehicles are expected to bolster mobility and survivability for Ukrainian forces on the ground. In addition to weapons and vehicles, the support package also features various types of ammunition, including precision-guided systems. France also emphasized its commitment to long-term cooperation, noting that part of the initiative involves manufacturing military equipment directly in Ukraine through collaborative efforts with French defense firms. Denmark has introduced a financial support measure aimed at encouraging its domestic companies to invest in Ukraine's defense industry, offering guarantees worth €130 million. This initiative was announced by Ukraine's first Deputy Prime Minister and Economy Minister, Yulia Sverdenko, on March 25th. The backing will be provided through the Export and Investment Fund of Denmark, a government financial instrument designed to support international investment by Danish firms. The program allows for state-backed guarantees covering up to 70% of a Danish company's investment in Ukraine's defense sector, with the total covered investment reaching as much as 1 billion Danish kroner. This move is part of a broader Danish strategy to strengthen Ukraine's military production by encouraging direct cooperation between Danish manufacturers and Ukrainian defense companies. According to Sverdenko, the new financial instrument is intended to reduce risks typically associated with investing in a conflict zone, thereby making it more attractive for Danish firms to enter the Ukrainian market. The initiative is also expected to facilitate access to Ukraine's defense expertise and innovation, including technology that has been refined through use in real battlefield conditions. The EIFO is already familiar to Danish businesses, having been an active player in supporting cross-border ventures, and is now being positioned to expand its role in Ukraine's defense sector. Norway has committed to providing 3 billion Norwegian kroner, or approximately $285 million in humanitarian aid to Ukraine and to Ukrainian refugees residing in Moldova throughout 2025. The announcement was made by the Norwegian government on March 27th. Norwegian Foreign Minister Espen Barth Eide, why does he have three names, Erlend, emphasized that strikes on civilian infrastructure, including homes, schools, hospitals, and power facilities, have continued at an intense pace, leading to a growing number of displaced Ukrainians. In response to a broader decline in international humanitarian funding for Ukraine, Norway is positioning itself as a consistent donor focused on protecting civilians and supporting life-saving efforts. Norway's humanitarian aid will be allocated to a range of international and national organizations, including the United Nations response programs in both Ukraine and Moldova, the International Committee of the Red Cross, the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent, and other humanitarian groups. In a recent visit from March 26 to March 27th, the Foreign Minister and Minister of Labor and Social Inclusion traveled to Kyiv and Kharkiv. During the visit, Norway donated a hybrid solar power plant to the Kharkiv Municipal Clinical Hospital. The initiative aims to provide consistent energy for critical hospital functions. Romania has confirmed its continued commitment to providing military assistance to Ukraine. Don't tell anybody though. Following a meeting of the Supreme Council for the National Defense, or CSAT, which was held on Friday. The announcement comes from a press release issued by the Romanian Presidential Administration and was reported by Romania Journal. It marked the first session of the CSAT since Ilie Bolojan assumed the role of acting president in February. The Council reviewed the ongoing situation in Ukraine, focusing on the impact of Russia's continued aggression and analyzing both the conditions on the ground and the potential direction of diplomatic efforts. Romanian officials acknowledged the recent ceasefire discussions and expressed support for U.S.-led initiatives, but view these only as a preliminary move to a potential agreement. Romania underscored its unique position as Ukraine's neighbor with the longest shared land and maritime border, emphasizing a vested interest in seeing an end to the war. Romanian leadership reiterated its desire for Ukraine to achieve stability and pursue its aspirations toward European integration in line with broader EU objectives. Ukraine has officially begun producing small arms ammunition under a licensing agreement with the Czech Republic, according to Ukraine's Minister for Strategic Industries, Herman Smetanin. This development marks a significant milestone in bilateral defense cooperation and follows a series of formal agreements and collaborative efforts that have been unfolding since 2023. The announcement was made during a meeting that included Czech President Petr Pavel and Ukrainian Presidential Advisor Oleksandr Kamyshin, during which several agreements were signed to support localized weapons production. The primary focus of the new agreements is the supply of components necessary for Ukraine to manufacture its own small arms ammunition and to begin assembly of Bren 2 assault rifles domestically. The move is expected to strengthen Ukraine's defense manufacturing base by reducing dependency on foreign supplies during the war. Collaboration in this area was first made public in April of 2023 when President Pavel noted that the Czech defense sector had outlined 6 major joint initiatives with Ukraine. These included not only ammunition and small arms production, but also the repair of T-64 and T-72 tanks and the co-production of FA-259 aircraft through a Czech firm. Cellier and Belot, a renowned Czech ammunition manufacturer, were identified early on as a key player in this partnership. Ukraine's defense industry has unveiled a new mobile air defense platform that repurposes the HMMWV vehicle chassis, equipping it with R-73 air-to-air guided missiles in a ground launch configuration. The system has been deployed to frontline units, specifically the 3rd Separate Assault Brigade, which shared images highlighting the extensive modifications made to the original vehicle. While the base frame remains, the design now features a custom-built cabin and newly installed missile launcher. The modernized system also incorporates electronic warfare modules mounted on the vehicle's roof, intended to disrupt and defend against FPV drones. The decision to integrate the R-73 missile is notable for its use of a heat-seeking guidance system and its ability to operate on a fire and relocate basis. Once launched, the missile autonomously tracks its target without the need for continuous operator guidance, enabling the vehicle to move immediately after firing and reducing its exposure to counterattack. The R-73 missile offers a forward engagement range of up to 20 kilometers with the RMD-1 version and up to 40 kilometers with the RMD-2. This mobile system is one of several mobile air defense platforms currently in use by Ukraine. It complements a U.S.-supplied ANTWQ-1 Avenger system, which also uses the HMMWV as a base, but is equipped with an FIM-92 Stinger missile and a 12.7mm Browning M2 machine gun. Avengers have played a role in defending urban areas, including repelling drone attacks on Kyiv. Ukrainian defense manufacturers have successfully established domestic production of spare parts for the American-made M113 armored personnel carrier, significantly improving the maintenance and operational readiness of these vehicles on the front lines. The development was announced by the Logistics Forces Command of Ukraine's Armed Forces, highlighting the growing self-sufficiency of Ukraine's military support infrastructure. Thanks to a steady supply of locally produced components, logistics teams have been able to speed up repair processes and expand the scale of restoration work. This has resulted in shorter wait times for essential parts, ensuring a higher number of M113s remain in active service and ready for deployment. Repair operations are no longer limited to specialized factories. Military logistics bases are also performing extensive overhauls themselves. After completing repairs, vehicles undergo trial runs to detect any remaining mechanical issues before being returned to the field. This proactive approach minimizes the risk of technical failure during combat operations and avoids the challenges associated with recovering damaged vehicles from active conflict zones. One of the soldiers involved in testing the repaired M113s, identified as Serhiy, emphasized the vehicle's practicality. He praised its straightforward handling and ease of maintenance, noting such features as its automatic transmission and relatively high speed of 56 km per hour, which supports rapid troop deployment and swift casualty evacuation. He also pointed out the vehicle's efficient fuel use, remarking that it can operate for an entire day on just 30 liters, which enhances its battlefield endurance. The International Monetary Fund has approved an additional $400 million disbursement to Ukraine as part of the country's ongoing financial assistance under the Extended Fund Facility. This decision was confirmed by the IMF's press service following the successful completion of the 7th review of Ukraine's program. The new funding brings in the total amount dispersed to Ukraine under the IMF-supported program to approximately $10 billion. The funds are earmarked to support Ukraine's state budget, helping to maintain economic functions amid the ongoing war and its fiscal pressures. The IMF emphasized that Ukraine has demonstrated a strong performance under the program, despite operating in extremely difficult circumstances. According to the IMF, the country's economy has shown notable resilience, which has allowed the government to meet the program's requirements consistently. On March 26, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development approved a €270 million loan to Ukraine's state energy company Naftogaz. The funds are intended to help the company purchase natural gas for use during the next 2 winter seasons, ensuring stable energy supplies amid the ongoing war and infrastructure disruptions. In addition to this loan, Norway is also contributing €140 million in grant funding through the EBRD, which further reinforces Ukraine's ability to secure energy resources. The Ukrainian Prime Minister emphasized that this funding will help the country increase its gas reserves and underground storage, a critical step toward maintaining energy security through the winter. Ukraine's energy sector has been repeatedly disrupted by attacks on infrastructure, which at times have reduced domestic gas production by up to 40%. These attacks have also forced Ukraine to rely more heavily on imported gas to meet its needs. Starting March 26, European Union ports will enforce a suspension on the transshipment of liquefied natural gas that originates from or is exported by Russia. This decision was announced by the European Commission's press office as part of a broader package of sanctions that were formally adopted in June 2024, but delayed in implementation until March 2025 to allow time for adjustment. The suspension applies not only to the physical handling of Russian LNG at EU ports, but also to associated services. These include technical assistance, brokerage operations, financing, and other forms of financial or logistical support connected to the movement of Russian LNG through European infrastructure. While the ban aims to restrict Russia's ability to route LNG through the EU facilities for export to other markets, an exception does exist. Individual EU member states may still authorize transshipment if the gas is intended for their own domestic consumption, allowing for some flexibility in meeting national energy needs. Russia is preparing to receive large quantities of chemical ingredients essential for the production of military-grade explosives, according to documentation reviewed by Bloomberg. These materials are primarily nitric acid and nitric sulfuric acid mixtures and have been ordered from major fertilizer producers that have thus far avoided the most restrictive international sanctions in Russia. Despite broad economic measures targeting Russia's defense sector, the country appears to be leveraging the dual-use nature of industrial chemicals to maintain and possibly expand its munitions output. The chemical orders are designated for JSC Spetschemia, a key explosive producer and subsidiary of the state-owned defense conglomerate Rostec. Based on the allocated volumes of nitric acid, Bloomberg estimates that Russia could produce at least 6,500 rounds of 152mm artillery shells per day in 2025. In total, Russia's current capacity for producing or refurbishing artillery rounds is believed to be in the range of 3 to 4 million. Planning documents outline deliveries scheduled throughout the year to various facilities, including those with histories of supplying both military and civilian explosive materials. Among these are the Sverdlov plant in Dzержinsk and the Bisk Oleum plant, both of which are linked to military applications and previously have been targeted by international sanctions. Though many of the facilities receiving these shipments are under sanctions, the suppliers themselves have largely continued operating within the global market, particularly due to the essential role their products play in international food production. The documentation reviewed includes order references and scheduling plans, indicating that deliveries are organized and expected to proceed throughout the year. Up next, we have international relations. An Irish military patrol aircraft was dispatched to monitor a Russian vessel that had anchored near a vital undersea communication cable off Ireland's northeastern coastline, according to a report by The Journal. This incident raised security concerns due to the vessel's proximity to critical infrastructure. The same vessel had previously drawn attention for its presence in the same region earlier in the year and reappeared near Irish waters on March 20th. Authorities identified the ship as being associated with Russia's Shadow Fleet. It had already been scrutinized for suspicious behavior in the Baltic Sea, which raised further alarms. Upon detecting the ship's renewed presence, the Irish Air Corps deployed a CASA 295 maritime patrol aircraft to intercept and monitor the vessel. This aircraft is used for maritime surveillance and reconnaissance and was tasked with gathering intelligence and observing the ship's activities to assess any potential threat to Irish infrastructure. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated that before any high-level negotiations between Washington and Moscow can take place, further progress must be made through lower-level technical discussions. Speaking to journalists en route to Myanmar, Rubio explained that the path forward depends on the outcomes of these preliminary talks and an internal assessment of recent diplomatic efforts. He plans to consult with the American negotiating team involved in the recent Saudi Arabia talks to better understand the discussions that took place and brief the U.S. president on their findings before determining the next steps. Rubio emphasized that the United States remains dedicated to the pursuit of peace, but cautioned that any potential resolution is not entirely within Washington's control. He noted that outcomes will depend heavily on the positions held by both Russia and Ukraine, as well as the role of European allies. Rubio's remarks also addressed Russia's recent expression of tentative support for a ceasefire in the Black Sea, a position reportedly outlined after multilateral talks hosted by Saudi Arabia. While Russia has claimed to signal openness to a truce, it has linked any cooperation to the lifting of specific Western sanctions. These include demands for removing restrictions on Russian food exporters, agricultural equipment imports, and Russian-flagged cargo ships, as well as reconnecting Russian financial institutions such as Roselkhozbank to the SWIFT global payment system. Rubio clarified that several of these conditions pertain to measures imposed by the European Union and not the United States and would require consensus from EU partners. In parallel, Ukraine already signaled a willingness to implement a full 30-day ceasefire as proposed by the U.S., provided Russia also commits to the deal. So far, Moscow has withheld full agreement and instead is pushing for a phased arrangement tied to concessions. And last item for this week, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has stated that he will examine the proposed agreement on control over Ukraine's mineral resources after legal experts assess it for potential risks to national legislation or sovereignty. His remarks come amid growing concern in Kyiv about a U.S.-driven proposal that, according to Ukrainian officials, seeks expansive influence over Ukraine's rare earth minerals and energy sector without offering corresponding security guarantees. Reports from the Financial Times suggest that the United States is pressing for a broad agreement that could significantly shift control of key Ukrainian assets abroad. Some senior Ukrainian officials have voiced strong opposition, describing the proposal as one-sided and potentially harmful to Ukraine's sovereignty. One official reportedly called the deal unfair, while another called it a form of appropriation. The concern centers around how profits and strategic control might be diverted away from Ukraine, deepening a dependency on Washington in exchange for limited or no firm commitments. Zelensky admitted that he has not yet personally reviewed the agreement, but emphasized that he will address the public openly if the deal is found to contain elements that threaten Ukraine's interests. He reiterated that Ukraine is not willing to accept new debts tied to such agreements, and stated that any future financial support from the U.S. may involve conditions, but past debts are not on the table for the agreement. Zelensky also raised concerns about how details of the proposed agreement have already reached members of parliament before he himself had the opportunity to review it. He questioned the source of these disclosures, noting the unusual accuracy of leaked points that had already reached both lawmakers and the media. He speculated that some MPs may be receiving information from foreign diplomatic missions and said this will be investigated to better understand the motivations behind the leaks and the broader context of how the agreement is being discussed and shaped behind the scenes. And that's it for the main headlines this week. We'll now move to the next segment.
Yeah, hello guys, that would be me. As always, I will now present this week's most important news from Germany regarding Ukraine. We are starting with a donation made public on Thursday by the German city Singen. They have donated a complete multi-sports facility worth 60,000 euros, which was financed by the German government, as well as another tranche of school desks and chairs, you see in the image, to the Ukrainian twin city of Kobylyaki. And already last but not least, the Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Action announced on Friday that they are contributing another 7.27 million euros to the Ukraine Energy Support Fund via the German state-owned development bank KfW for the repair of damaged Ukrainian infrastructure. And yeah, that's it for my segment. So back to you, Joseph.
Thank you. I think I'm going to turn it over to Erlend. I think we'll maybe set this up better than me, Mr. Erlend.
Oh, well, thank you. First I wanted to welcome Jonathan from ATP Geopolitics. Thank you for joining us today. Can you hear us?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm just going to see if you can see me. I know you guys don't like to be seen, and I don't know why I can't be seen, but apparently, well, okay, you don't have to see me. Who wants to see me anyway? But yeah, good to be here. And oh, hello, good to be here. And thank you for the invite. It is a crazy time that we live in when I've had a really busy Sunday because it's Mothering Sunday in the UK. So loads of family round. And I've been kind of out of it for, I don't know, maybe 7 hours today. And I think the world could have just wholly changed in 7 hours. Like we're at a point where 7 hours is a massively long time, geopolitically speaking. And I'm thinking, what's happened since then? Has Trump done something mental? Has Zelensky wound someone up? Has Putin said that he's going to nuke a country? Has Greenland actually been invaded? Luckily, I was just looking at threads. I don't think it's gone too crazy, other than the very, very big news that Trump, and this is something we were all thinking about previously, that Trump may well be, quote, pissed off with Putin, which is one of the very few options that would be very, very good for Ukraine. But I don't know, maybe we can speak about that. But all in all, thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, I think we can do some general commentary on the state of affairs of the world and geopolitics towards the end. Absolutely. So the reason for why I invited you, because Artem here, and welcome Artem, first time on the Tochnyi stream.
Hello, everybody. It's nice to be here.
Very happy to have you on the stream. Because you talked about Artem's article, right? And Artem is he just published this article this week, and it's a very big, research behind it. The article, I think, is fantastic. Points out some very interesting facts about the current state of affairs of the drone interceptions. And yeah, I'm just gonna turn it over to Artem, who has some stuff prepared for us. So. What did you want to start with, Artem? I have a question for you. What did you find out? What was your finding when you were doing the research and started to prepare the article that you were most surprised about?
Well, there are a lot of things that fascinated me, but maybe the most interesting part was that a lot of different independent initiatives kind of picked up that idea and started to provide units with the equipment and started to facilitate this FPV interception thing. So I expected the government to take it under control, or one big initiative to monopolize that whole thing. But right now we have about 3 major projects and about 5 more smaller projects who are working independently.
And they are all fundraised, right? They are civilian fundraisers that are funding the buying equipment and drones, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
They are.
And then I found a thing with your article which I thought was very interesting, and it's that one unit in particular is doing something very differently than all the others, or at least they're doing it more often. So maybe you can explain a little bit about that. I guess you understand what I mean.
Yes. So FPV interception is normally, statistically, very often filmed from the behind the enemy drone, and FPV interceptor approaches enemy drone from above or like in the horizontal plane, on the same level, on the same altitude with the enemy drone. But several units and 82nd Air Assault Brigade especially, this video illustrates that they are approaching enemy drone very, very often from the beneath. And this is quite interesting because this counters the cameras that Russians installing on the back of the drone to auto-maneuver. And also it might hint us that this unit has ground facilities that store FPV interceptor, and they are not patrolling the sky, but maybe trigger the FPV interceptor right in the time when enemy drone is flying above, like surface-to-air missile, basically.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So you mentioned that they have a camera at the rear, and that's something that you've seen in a lot of the videos, that they mounted the camera on top of the tail fin, right?
No, it
No?
is closer to the front of the drone, not the tail, but to the head.
But they are, and those cameras are there to observe incoming FPV drones, right?
Yes, they are very, very primitive, and they are not really effective, not really efficient. But Russians are trying to come up with some ideas. So they mount those cameras on Zalas Z16, and they programmed the drone to automatically dive whenever it sees a Ukrainian FPV interceptor.
Can I ask, Erlend, when those drones are coming up from below, do you know whether they are ramming them or whether they have explosives with those particular ones?
Well, we can assume that they are exploding because on ramming videos, we sometimes can see the aftermath of the ramming. But these videos, they end exactly like they exploded.
And do you have many incidents of ramming in general, or is it almost entirely explosions?
It is almost entirely explosions. In early days, in September, August of 2024, there were quite a lot of ramming occurrences, but this idea was became less and less popular, and now we rarely see that.
So I think it's interesting, though, that this special technique, and you mentioned it in your article here, where they approach from beneath, is mainly being done by the 82nd, and they are also those that have most public interceptions. So I think that aspect is interesting.
Yeah, it is a combination of factors because they were operating in Kursk, and that area was of very big interest to the enemy. So obviously there were a lot of enemy drones deployed. So they had a very big field to operate in, and also they did it efficiently. They made a lot of interceptions.
Yeah. Okay, so you wanted to show us something on the map. So I'm just going to go to the first screenshot that you made, and then let me know where you want to go on the map.
Yes. Okay. So this screenshot is a scheme of the front line as I see it. And let's look at the white line. It goes along the Belarusian border, Russian border, and occupied parts of Moldova. And we can expect enemy drones flying there, but we do not see any confirmation of that. And 2 days ago, we received the very first footage from that yellow circle that is shown here. We received 2 footages of intercepting Russian drones there. They were made by 420th separate battalion. And I assume that we will see more of the white spaces to be filled in future.
Do you think that's because the Russians are not flying so much here, or because the Ukrainians are not publishing that they're intercepting drones there?
I suppose it is OPSEC.
Yeah.
Because with that gigantic amount of recon drones and big interest in the Ukrainian territory, I think that enemy really uses them everywhere.
Yeah. So just gonna change to the live map. So what you're saying is that you geolocated 2 interceptions around Chernihiv, right?
Yes. One interception was geolocated by me and another by Gik, another contributor to the OSINT community.
Yep.
Would it be fair to say that where you have more instances of interceptions on the map, not in those areas of the white line as it was, would that be? I know you say it could be due to OPSEC, but also there are going to be, because that's an active part of the front line, there are going to be more medium range targets there, such as air defense systems and other bits and pieces, artillery, self-propelled. Multiple launch rocket systems and so on and so forth, which are usually, the sorts of things that the Russians are trying to spot with their particularly air defense systems, with their medium range sort of Zalas and Supercams, and then with their Lancers. Is that fair to say that could be also why there are many more interceptions there?
Can you specify your question, because I quite lost it?
Yeah, sorry, that's me talking too much. Basically, there are more interceptions in these areas where there's an active front line. So, although you were saying you haven't marked too many on these other areas, you were saying that could be because of OPSEC. But actually, surely there are also very many more reconnaissance drones being used over the active frontline areas because there are more targets. Is that right?
Yeah, that is a very good point. And I think that historically FPV interceptions, they appeared after Ukrainian forces realized that they cannot deal with that big amount of enemy drones only by standard surface-to-air missiles or manpads, and basically Ukrainian forces were overwhelmed, and default means to shoot down drones did not work anymore. So yeah, maybe along that white line where we do not see any interceptions, it is much emptier, and default IGLA manpad or maybe OSA complex, they are doing their job, so they are enough.
Do you? I have another question, if you don't mind. Do you know if there are if the interceptions are cheaper than use? I mean, I assume they are, but do you have any indication that they are cheaper, and how much cheaper they are than using, say, manpads, but particularly air defense systems, larger ones?
Yes, they are much cheaper, and it is very hard to estimate the price of the missile or usage of the air defense complex, especially during the war, because prices can be arbitrary, and you cannot say that there is a big supermarket where you have a standard price. It's always a very specific purchase of those pieces of equipment. So we do not know how much it was using the standard means, but we know that FPV interceptor, night vision wing type FPV interceptor is $2,500 US.
Yeah.
Day vision is 1,600.
And of course, the amount of return on investment you get from taking these down. I mean, this is what we used to say right at the beginning of the war, when you saw an expensive missile take out one of these Orlan 10 or Orlan 30 drones. People are saying, but these missiles are far more expensive than the drones. Yeah, but it's what the drones are spotting for and allowing the destruction of. That's the value of these drones. It's in what they end up facilitating the destruction of. And so, you know, to have an interceptor that's that cheap as well, you're getting a really good return on your investment.
Yes, 100%. Yes, and even more than that, in late 2023 and the beginning 2024, there were numerous reports from Ukrainian forces, from different bloggers on the military topic. They were saying that Russian reconnaissance is all present, and it effectively paralyzes any activity that Ukrainian forces should do in the rear. It was even more threat than solely to air defense complexes.
So it wasn't just the fact that the cost of intercepting was too high, but there were just not enough means to actually stop it.
Yes. Volume was too big, and even if we had additional billions and billions of dollars to purchase the missiles, it was not practically possible.
This brings up one of the questions I wanted to ask you, Artem, and you know, when I was thinking about this earlier, and maybe the rest of the team can have a thought on this, I don't know, but it seems that drones are being intercepted at a much greater rate now, reconnaissance drones particularly, at a much greater rate now. And we were saying and I remember Andrew Perpetua was going on about this for bloody ages, and rightly so. We're all talking in the OSINT community about how the Ukrainians really needed to react to these reconnaissance drones, that these Orlan 10s and 30s were getting through right at the beginning of the war, and they were leading to the destruction of air defense systems, and they were a real pain in the neck. And it took an awful long time for Ukraine to react. And I wonder whether part of that was to do with a lack of centralized thinking in Ukraine. So it wasn't until maybe Commission came in as the strategic industries guy, a minister. So he was the railway minister, then became the strategic industries minister. He's now the advisor for strategic industries in Zelensky's inner circle. But it was at that point where you started seeing things getting developed, because there was someone centrally going, right, these are the needs across the battlefield, rather than previous to that. I would imagine there have been different military districts going, oh, we've got an issue, what are we doing about this, what are we doing about that, rather than someone sitting down and thinking strategically about what the entire front line needed. Is that something that anyone's thoughts about at all?
Well, there was quite of a delay, but I assume that it was normal for the government. If you are asking the government employee, even in Ministry of Defense, how should we deal with problem this and that, they will answer you in standard plane. They will say, okay, we need more books, we need more patriots, we need more standard measures and means to deal with that problem. And government can and government should pick up the initiatives that are working, and they should finance them and help support them. But to come up with that idea, I suppose that government is not designed to do it.
I think that in this case, we have a merge of different things happening at the same time that enable this success, because Ukraine obviously also did receive quite a lot of counter-UAS radar systems, and I don't think that we would have seen the same success with the interception drones if they didn't have quite a lot of them at the time where the drones started emerging. But from what I've understood is that it's mainly a bottom-up initiative that has at least developed the technology and also proliferated these drones widely across the ZSU. Is that correct, Artem?
Yes. It was confirmed by the head of Come Back Alive charity foundation. He said that really the radar network is the crucial and central part of those interceptions. And we see a lot of videos, and we never see how radar works or how that monitoring is being performed. But without radars and without foreign aid and supply of those radars, it would be impossible.
Which then indicates that the key to continued or improved success in intercepting these reconnaissance drones is sort of decent radar coverage. Does anyone know if, because at the moment the domestic production for Ukraine in terms of many pieces of kit is really improving. So we're seeing Bogdana 2S22 self-propelled guns being produced at maybe getting up somewhere between 18 and 40 a month. They're starting to produce towed howitzers. They're starting to produce MRAPs and whatnot. Do they have the capability of producing radar systems and some of those really high-end technological solutions that are needed on the battlefield?
We don't have any information on that because it is classified, and also it's not that catchy and popular, so we will not see bloggers or charity foundations putting that on the front pages, and we don't have info on that.
I will say that Ukraine does have some domestic radar programs, but I have not seen any concrete information about the scale at which any of these are being produced at, and I suspect that it is probably pretty limited, given that they don't seem to be very prevalent. I think that there is actually probably more success in producing electronic warfare equipment domestically than there is with producing radar systems domestically, especially any sort of higher end radar systems. Ukraine is absolutely not producing anything on the same magnitude as the donated systems from the United States or Europe. If you want to look at Patriot radars or Sentinel radars or Groundmaster from France, Ukraine's not making any of these kind of systems on their own. But there are efforts to expand joint defense industrial cooperation to do more of that. I know that believe Vital Scientific, which is a Danish radar manufacturer, they have a memorandum of understanding with Ukrainian industry to try and do some production. I don't know all the details of what exactly they're looking at, but there's definitely some movement there. But radars are of course a lot more complicated to produce than conventional munitions, and we know that Ukraine is still having a lot of struggles with standing up production of Western caliber conventional munitions. So radars are going to be a much more challenging project for them.
Yeah, you can bet they would if they could. I mean, this will be, obviously they want everything and they want to be able to produce everything themselves because that will convey so many advantages. But that will be one of the more difficult things for them to make.
I just wanted to mention that there are several of these counter-UAS radar systems that are deployed in Ukraine. This is one example, the Cortex counter-UAS system from Kongsberg, which is not only with components from Kongsberg, of course, but I know that the Americans have supplied these kind of systems, the UK have, and I think France have as well. And they are, as you can see, very small radar installations, but they are, as far as I've understood, also very effective.
Yeah, I thought I was gonna be reporting on something. Is it for tomorrow? I'm sure they are working together with someone, and it might be Norway, to produce. I'm sure I had this. Maybe I reported it the other day. That they're going to be working closely with Norway on something like that. But oh, here it is. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, Thierry was showing this to me as well. This is a Nordic startup against low-cost drones. Which is called the Swedish startup Nordic Air Defence has unveiled a low-cost interceptor to combat drones, the Kreuger 100, designed for use on the battlefield and to protect critical infrastructures characterized by high speed, up to 270 kilometers an hour, and has a very good efficiency. Even if we make great progress, it will be difficult to combat saturation attacks. Lasers will be the answer. In the meantime, if they could deliver some to Ukraine, it would save lives. So yeah, they are. Sorry to read that all out, but the point is that yeah, they are working on getting these into Ukraine by working in partnership with, particularly, it seems, Norway here, or Sweden here, and you were saying Norway. So yeah.
Okay.
I want to add that regarding the radar systems, I suppose that Ukraine have to ramp up the production of decoys of the Western supplied radars because there were like Telegram messages and big channels that enemy can try to increase their efforts to find Ukrainian radars that we have right now deployed. So if we were to produce more decoys and provide frontline with more decoys, it would be beneficial. And also, even I think it would be nice to just imagine that we produced or developed Ukrainian-made radar that is very cheap, but the story can be totally fake, and it will be only decoy. But still, this ad campaign and this provision of big number of fake radars to the front line would be very, very helpful.
So you wanted to go through some of the areas along the front line, as far as understood. Do you want to start with the saturated area around Kursk, or did you have anything more to say about the Bryansk border and border towards Belarus?
Oh no, let's start with Kursk. So right now we on this layer, on the daily update map, we can see all interceptions from all periods, and obviously frontline moved back and forth, and the interceptions were moving as well. But what's interesting here is that we can see the furthest interceptions, like Supercams, Zalas, the northernmost interceptions, and we can see a lot of Lancets in the middle. The blue icons, those are Lancets who were hunting for Ukrainian artillery and rear lines. But nothing more to it. Oh, maybe one more thing. In the bottom part, you can see Supercams and Merlins on the Russian territories, and those are the place marks for Magyar birds interceptions. They're very recent, and right now we can say that it is these are interceptions in red area, which is unusual. But in reality, I suppose that Ukrainian forces pushed a little into that area, so it's more of a gray or even green controlled area.
Yeah, so this is the area where Ukraine just recently pushed into Belgorod, and I assume that is in support of that operation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we saw the same with Shevchenko offensive south to the Pokrovsk. a lot of interceptions were made there in red area, but later we realized that that was actually gray area because Ukrainian forces pushed the line.
But most of the other interceptions are basically in defense. We can see.
Yes, 95% of interceptions are in green or gray areas. And what's interesting is that we are now in March 2025, and it did not change really because you cannot say that we have a wall that forbids Russian drones to fly in some particular areas. They are flying pretty deep into the Ukrainian controlled territory, but the difference is that their time of remaining in the air is much shorter now than it was before. Yeah, so the next cluster is northern Kharkiv, and here we see two groups like near the Vovchansk and northern Kharkiv area. They are not active in terms of interceptions lately. We don't see a lot of info from there, but they are quite big, and a lot of work has been done there to restrict Russian reconnaissance. The next group, let's move a little bit. It's Dvorichna and northern part to Dvorichna. It is interesting. It is really interesting to me because 127th Territorial Defense Brigade was rotated there, and they started to intercept drones in that area. And we finally are able to see interceptions to the north from Kupiansk. I don't know, maybe it is because of the informational strategy of the brigade, or they really moved in there and they started to work properly to counter Russian drones. But in the result, we see that there are a lot of new interceptions there, and we can assume that there will be more. Okay, so let's move to Kupiansk. These clusters of interceptions are rather old. There are a lot of brigades operating in that area. The most prominent are 3rd Assault Brigade and 77th, but it is rare to see only one brigade working in the area, so there are a lot more units who are intercepting Russian drones. So it's just another area. Let's move a little bit to the south, to the Siversk. Yeah. So here is Serbransky Forestry, a little bit more to the south. Yeah, Serbransky Forestry and Siversk area, it is very dense, and units are working in terms of interceptions there. And what's interesting is that the next cluster is Chasiv Yar Konstantinivka. But between these two clusters, there is a gap, and we have not seen any interceptions from this area, like zero. And even those interceptions that kind of approach and to close that gap, they are very old, very, very old, from the summer 2024. So this area is unknown to us. Yeah, the biggest cluster is Chasivyar-Konstantinivka, and it stretches down to the Toretsk, and it is very stable area because at any given month or week you will see a lot of interceptions there. So Ukrainian forces set up a working system to counter Russian reconnaissance, but enemy is not is not impressed, and they are sending more and more and more drones there. And yeah, this is the balance that we have right now.
Do you know from the top of your head which are the most active Ukrainian units here?
Yeah, there are a lot. The most active is 93rd Brigade, then 5th Separate Assault Brigade, 28th Mechanized Brigade, 24th. There were rotations of, if I'm not mistaken, 112th Brigade, but I don't remember that part of the list. Okay, and next area is, let's move to Pokrovsk, and it will show us, it will show us this big cluster, Pokrovsk, Mirnograd, and all the way to Konstantinivka. It's quite new, and it's very active lately, and even sometimes we could see the Russian drones that were marked with the name of the Russian unit on its back. So as everywhere Russian command, they supply a lot of drones to a lot of units, so they even have to mark their drones with a magic marker on its back to which unit it belongs.
Artem, real quick, I think some people maybe just stepped in and they're seeing like all these colors and dots. Could you just very briefly explain the colors and dots?
Yes, for sure. So the dominant color is pink. It marks the Zala Z16, and purple is Zala Z20. These are Zalas are the most frequent drones that we can see in interception videos. The next is yellow supercam drone. Yes, and supercams and scats. They're top two. The third place in frequency table is Orlan, and Orlan 10 and Orlan 30. So these are top three groups, and occasionally we can see strike drones like Lancets, dark blue.
Can I just ask, at the beginning of the war, like it was all about Orlan 10s, Orlan 30s, but throughout the war, I presume the Russians have just made better drones than the Orlan. The Orlan was good, it was cheap, it did a job, but obviously the war, 3 years is a long time, and they'll be producing a lot more. Is that what you're saying? Basically, that what is a better drone, and what are the metrics of success for, or of evaluation for these drones?
Yeah. I suppose that Orlans were quite complex and hard to produce because they are internal. They are using internal combustion engine, so they have to import those engines or develop those engines somewhere, and it is quite hard, much harder than make battery. Electric battery and electric driven propeller like on Zala. So they moved away from Orlans. Also, I think that they started to use more Zalas because they are much colder and they are not so apparent in the thermal vision cameras. They are much colder than Orlans. Well, The statistics shows it all. Zala Z16 is the most popular drone, and I suppose it is the best drone for Russian needs. And I personally think it is very subjective idea that I personally think that Merlin, the purplish icon, can you click on M, just single M? It's in the southern Pokrovsk. Oh yeah, here, Merlin. It's a very big, durable drone, and it can fly at altitudes of 500 or 5 kilometers, and it is very expensive with big and very complex camera, but it is intercepted in the same exactly way as Zala, and Zala is much cheaper, much smaller, and much easier to operate. So the statistics shows it all.
Artem, I have
Thanks for
kind of yeah, thanks, Roman. I have kind of a weird question. It's sort of like, so we obviously have seen a real success with drones countering drones. I think that's sort of been established now. I don't think there's any denying that. Do you think we'll see countermeasures in place for the reconnaissance drones to counter the drones that counter the drones? You know what I mean? Like, will we see a little machine gun on the reconnaissance drone that tries to shoot the drones that are designed to take it down? How do you see this evolving?
Will the mouse eat the cat?
Yeah. First, I think that it is not only issue with air-to-air combat. It is also an issue for ground forces and MRAPs, tanks, and IFVs. So I suppose we will see those countermeasures on the ground first, and then they will come up with a miniaturized issue of that countermeasure and install on the reconnaissance drone. But for now, I don't see that coming.
Should we go to the next area?
Yeah, we can just stroll through next clusters, like all the way to Kherson. Just scroll through them because these areas are not as dense and popular as Chasiv Yar, Konstantinivka, and there are not many gaps in those. Like, units are working in a steady manner to counter reconnaissance and strike drones there. So we can just observe that on the map, and that's it. Yeah, Nikopol area was mystery for a long time, but as we can see now, interceptions are being published from there, and it is just normal, steady work.
Yeah. And how many interceptions did you geolocalize here?
Yeah.
Geolocate, sorry.
In the article, it was as of 22nd of March. There were 2,500 total, but now we have 2,700 total and geolocated 2,040 interceptions. It's not public at the moment, but it will be published on the same layer, on the same map.
Yeah, so total drones that have been published, or interceptions with drones that are published, are 2,517 in this article, but it's already, of course, increased.
Yes, 2,700 as of now.
Yep. And are there any other particular aspects of your analysis that you want to highlight? Like, for instance, the winter had a drop. I think that's a little bit interesting. Do you know? Do you have a conclusion about why that happened?
There are a lot of speculations, and I presented my set of speculations about the efficiency of the interceptions, and you may read in the article. And yeah, there are a lot of factors that influence the efficiency at any given moment. But I suppose the main factors are weather, Ukrainian tactic, and Russian tactic. Right now, we see that Ukrainian tactic is to intercept as many as we can. Russian tactic is to send as many drones as they can, no matter the losses. And weather is not, and weather is changing. And even in today's video from Magyar Birds, he said that they were working with interceptions for 5 days in that area that they are currently in the offensive. Yeah, and from those 5 days, there were 2 days with very bad weather, so obviously no interceptions then. And maybe here we can see the big evidence of the bad weather influence. But there are also other factors.
That was not the correct video, but I will fix it because he just published a video of interceptions.
Yeah, he did.
But yeah, I think that there's also some aspects that are interesting to talk about when it comes to the different interceptor drones, and specifically with Magyar, they use, at least it looks like they mainly use fixed wing interception drones, right?
Yes. I think that it is a fixed wing, but I cannot prove that. And I have idea that this drone is being manufactured by a startup, and the director of that startup, he is starting to publish some information about the efficiency of his FPV interceptor, but he says that it is he's asked to withhold that information for now. So I assume we will know much more details, but later, maybe in several months.
Yeah, but you can definitely see a difference from the other interceptor drones because we can't see any propellers, and it looks like it flies like a fixed wing drone.
Yes, you're right.
I've just sent in a private chat. I've just sent a video link to, and I don't know if anyone's got any opinions on this, but there's some video footage coming out the other day of 2 thermal hits on Russian, I think maybe Shahed drones at night. And these, I know it's not to do with reconnaissance drones that you're talking about, but the idea is that there's a new type of interceptor drone, an experimental one that does auto-targeting. And don't know if anyone had any knowledge of that. And yeah, this is the video. So it doesn't really show you much other than 1, this is at night, 2, they appear to be Shahed drones, and 3, that's new that Shahed drones are being taken out with interceptor drones. It's not something that we've particularly seen before, but this is apparently being done. This is a new experimental interceptor drone being, I think, created in cahoots with a foreign nation as well. So I don't know if that was worth talking about at all.
Good luck geolocating them, Artem.
Yes. Yeah, that is impossible. We can already conclude. So this is quite sad that publisher, I will not translate it to English, but you probably know the name of that structure. So they did not recognize the Herber drone, and they thought that it is a Shahed drone. and there is a big difference between those. Herber drone has much smaller airspeed, lower altitudes, and it is actually a decoy with a small amount of explosives. And it was first time intercepted probably 5 months ago, so it is not news. They misid'd this drone, and now, like today, we cannot say that here are videos of Shahed interceptions and it is a revolution and it is a new page. But I really, really hope that Ukrainian manufacturers of interceptors, they will provide the drone that will fly fast enough, that will be controlled by software good enough to reliably intercept Shaheds, and it will be really a remarkable milestone, but it is not right now.
Yeah, this is the Gerbera drone, and actually, we know that this has been intercepted several times. I've seen in with my own eyes a intercepted Gerbera drone that was intercepted with one of the Come Back Alive drones. So,
yeah, it is good. It is a long-range strike drone that is overstressing the air defense in Ukrainian rear cities, and it is good that our defense forces are able to detect them and to intercept them. It is a big help to our air defense, but it is not a proper solution to Shahed interceptions, because Herbera is slower than Shahed, and we cannot catch up with Shaheds.
okay. Do you have anything that you want to, any end remarks?
No. Thank you, everybody, for attention. I'm quite nervous.
This was great. Jonathan, or anyone else in the panel, do you have any more questions to Artem before we move to some general discussion and Q&A?
The only other, so I don't know if it's a question, but it's more of a musing really, is that I wonder, I presume we don't, but it would be really interesting to know what the data would be on the success of reconnaissance drones, right? So in other words, well, what is the metric of success for a reconnaissance drone? Is it in like just gathering data? Is it kind of like a bit of a vague thing that I would just sending up gathering data, or can you measure how successful a mission has been? And then is it really about gathering enough data to do a strike, and how many reconnaissance drones turn into strikes? That kind of thing, like that kind of data set would be really interesting to know, to then talk about how successful you can be in intercepting them, and what you are achieving by intercepting a single drone. That kind of thing. Like we don't have the data for that, right? But I don't know if that's anything anyone else has ever thought about. But anyway, that's just my musings.
Yeah, that would be really interesting to know, but I think we cannot access the success rate of Russian reconnaissance missions because it is not public, and they are disclosing only small part of those. I think that with interceptions, we did not create a solid wall that forbids any kind of reconnaissance, but we created a tool that forbids continuous reconnaissance and maybe seeking of new targets. So whenever Russian assault starts, mechanized assault, it was reported when during the defense of Kurakhove in Donetsk Oblast. The unit who was in that area defending against that mechanized assault, it reported that after they intercepted 2 supercams that were supervising the assault went much worse, and the coordination and cooperation worsened for Russian forces. That is the effect that we can conclude. But about the metrics, data, and statistics, unfortunately, it's not available.
Thank you.
There were a lot of questions. One in chat, and one question was, for instance, if there is a possibility to use, for instance, EW on a drone to disable Russian reconnaissance drone. I assume that is possible, but I'm not sure if it will actually make the drone crash. And I think that it seems like the Ukrainians have opted for the kinetic solution here, and not so much.
I think it's not. I think it's also not really practically useful. Like, I'm no expert here, right? My pure speculation. Sorry, I know you've asked that to Artem, but like, when you have drone interceptions on the battlefield, you are kind of protecting an area where your troops are, and you don't want the enemy drones to come into that area. And so you have this to take out anything in that frequency in this area. When you're talking about an entire area of sky, you would need to have so many interceptor drones in order to do that. And then worries about frequency, but it's just, if you are, what these interceptor drones, I presume, undergo is a process of target acquisition. So yeah, we found that target on the radar, we've required it, we're going to send something up. So therefore it's probably cheaper to just ram the crap out of it rather than have some cumbersome electronic warfare thing. So you find the thing and then you take it out. Drone, like electronic warfare interception, isn't about target acquisition. So it's just there as a protective thing. And if you have it as a protective thing over an entire front line, you're just going to need an absolute ton of those things. So I think it's not quite, horses for courses. It's the wrong horse for that course. I don't know. That's just my thoughts.
There were reports that Russian reconnaissance drones are military grade, and they are programmed to return to the home base on a signal loss or after they finish their route. So there is no value in jamming that drone and preventing operator from seeing online video feed, because they will be able to recover that video when drone will return. That's it.
And then, of course, there's a question about if there is a way to use these kind of drones to intercept fiber optic guided drones.
Yes, it is possible. The bottleneck there will be the cost of interceptions, because fiber optic drones are much simpler and much easier, cheaper to produce. So we will not be able to provide enough FPV interceptors to the front line.
I know Magyar was very proud when they intercepted some fiber optic drones with FPV drones. So I've seen a couple of videos of it, but not too many.
Yeah, it's a happy occasion. Right now, to counter fiber optic drones, we have basically shotguns only. Whether it is shotgun mounted on the Vampire drone that is patrolling the area, or is it shotgun in the hands of the Ukrainian soldier? But this is the only method to counter optic fiber.
Okay. I don't see any other specific questions right now.
Just
but-
on fiber optic drones, there was some talk, and I would think this would be, wholly hopeful rather than really practical, but there was some talk about being able to spot fiber optic drones and then be able to see the actual line glinting, or have some kind of quality where you can see it on certain, I don't know, thermal drones or something, and then be able to track that back to the operator and then hit the operators. So that was something I've seen discussed, but I don't know how successful that has been, whether it's just a kind of, oh, let's hope we can do something like this.
Well, that's interesting. Interesting mention. I did not see that.
Yeah, I also heard that there are ways of using certain spectrum cameras. So, like, I'm not sure. Probably night vision spectrum cameras, so IR cameras, can see the reflections of the fibers and actually follow them to the origin. But I haven't seen any proof of it. Germinate, you had a question, you said.
Yes, thank you. So my question is very specific. There is a German drone manufacturer who regularly supplies drones to Ukraine on behalf of the German government. And they did testing a couple of months ago, and they actually produce and also deliver already retrofit decals for their surveillance drones or reconnaissance drones to the Ukrainian army. So with different themes. So, for example, very white, grayish decals, which the drone operators can put on their drones, so the drone, is less easier spotted in the sky. And during summer, there's different.
Sorry, what was that word you said? Is it disguise? You said
decals.
Oh, decal.
Retrofit decals, like you got stickers and you put them on the drone to disguise them in the and my question would be if you have noticed Ukrainian manufacturers or other manufacturers doing testing or actually doing this in the real world, because that would be interesting to me. I just saw that with the German manufacturer once a couple of months ago, and never saw anything like that in the field again.
We could see the paint camouflage and only basic default color of the plastic. So this measure is interesting, but it is a measure of last chance, last hope, and it will not help in most of the cases. So it's like kind of cool upgrade that we can use. And I did not see any of the things that you mentioned from the German manufacturer, or I did not recognize that it was German manufacturer.
But you've seen a lot of the Russian drones painted, right?
Yes, that is exactly the problem. We can see a lot of Russian painted drones, and that is how we know that paint is not working properly, and it is not the secure measure to counter interceptions. And I assume that primary method of the detection is radio reconnaissance and not the optic reconnaissance.
Yep. Brendan has a question. Do you see Russians employing decoy drones in the future to protect their recon drones, much like Parody and Gerbera try to prevent intercepts or shoot downs of Shaheds?
The future is unknown. There are a lot of possibilities, like net shooter or recoilless shotgun to shoot down the FPV interceptor, or bunch of decoy drones. All these variants are possible, but they require big technical research, implementation, and assessment of their cost efficiency.
Yeah. So also this was kind of on topic. Does AA cannons and machine guns bother intercepting spotter drones in general, or are they still successful? Because Ukraine is obviously intercepting reconnaissance drones with other means as well, even though probably less than before. Do you have any information that you've spotted about that?
Generally, it is secret, and we do not have reports on that. I remember from October 2024, the post in Studentka community when he said that air defense regiment intercepted, let's say, 100 drones, and 50 of those were intercepted using standard means like AA guns, missiles, and etc. And 50 were intercepted by FPV interceptors. It was the report in October 2024. Right now, we don't know.
Okay. I think this is the last question from chat. I assume surveillance drones fly at a higher elevation out of range of ground-based guns. So yeah, it's not. It's more of an observation. My mistake. But yeah, the surveillance drones have been flying higher than what is practically to shoot down with air defense cannons or autocannons. So that has been a big problem for Ukraine. I remember Andrew was shouting about this in 2023, and Ukraine came up with the FPV drone interceptor. So here we are. Thank you so much, Artem.
Thank you, everybody.
And I just wanted to say that the map that we used, you can find a link to it in the article. Please go and read Artem's article, because there's a lot more details in it. And there's a link here to the map. You can also go on Andrew Pepeto's map, so map.ukrainedailyupdate.com. And there is a filter here. You can turn on and off this layer, so you can see Artem's accumulated interceptions, or you can see them in the daily map when they are geolocalized. So they will appear in the events here. So for instance here. Okay. You're free to stay with us, Artem, but I guess we're gonna move on to some of the bits and pieces from Joseph that we missed from the news, and I think there are several things we will discuss with Jonathan here, because I have suspicion that at least one of the items that Joseph has is interesting for you, Jonathan.
I love some bits and pieces, me.
Yes, my extra bits this week. I had a few. I heard the stream was going to be kind of crazy this week, so I didn't work as meticulously on them as usual. But there were meetings in Paris this week by European leaders. I didn't follow all the particulars, but it sounds like the British were there, the French were there, several other European nations were there. The French and the British discussed establishing a working group on Ukraine. So yeah, I don't know. I think that might be a good opportunity broadly to speak about the current European security situation vis-a-vis Ukraine. where we see it kind of heading in terms of the response to the US's recent actions.
I was just reading, actually, I'm just trying to find it, that the Europeans might well be, I don't know whether they're using what they're doing in terms of putting peacekeepers on the ground in this way, but they could be leveraging themselves into having more effect on the kind of peace negotiations and whatnot. Europe seemed to be, yeah, so it's a Washington Post. Europe seeks leverage as Trump negotiates with Russia on Ukraine. So at the moment, Europe are looking by as Ukraine and the US talk and as the US and Russia talk. But Europe really need a seat at the table. Ukraine want Europe to have a seat at the table. Ukraine know that Europe are Ukraine's allies, right? Where the US has seemingly just completely changed sides. And I think for the US, for Europe to be quite forceful here and tangibly put troops on the ground. So we know that there's a Franco-British contingent going out to sort of lay the groundwork at the moment. I don't know how many, 200 or whatever people that are going to start, putting things together out there in Ukraine. That's happening this week. It seems, and then you'll have a larger contingent eventually coming through. But this could be like Europe just muscling in as they, I think, need to on the negotiations, and hopefully either the US get bored and Trump either gets bored, or the latest thing is that he's really pissed off, and that's a quote, with Russia, which is always one of the options that could have happened. Like if Putin overplayed his hand, then you could have it so that Trump just gets really annoyed, and then that's when tariffs hit, and that's when Trump just starts doing what he should have done anyway. So I think there's some really interesting dynamics going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a curious choice from the beginning for the United States to claim that Europe wouldn't be involved in the negotiations and to just kind of bypass Europe entirely. I think we all assumed that would eventually backfire, but we were kind of waiting for it to happen. I think this week is the beginning of that, which is like Russia made basically the US said, you need to do the ceasefire, Russia. And Russia said, we won't do the ceasefire until you unfreeze these banks on SWIFT. And then the US went to Europe and said, you need to unfreeze the banks on SWIFT. And Europe said no. So that's, I think, the moment the US, is like hitting the wall here when it comes to like, to have a peace settlement, Europe does have input, right? I think that's kind of getting to what you're saying. Like Europe has some leverage here, probably not as much as they'd like. They were kind of alarmed by being frozen out of the negotiations. And I don't want to say panicking, but like kind of baffled about what to do. But I think this is the first week we're seeing like a real like coordinated response. And we're seeing the US fumble a bit in terms of like, they're realizing that Russia is intrinsically demanding things that require Europe to cooperate. For example, restarting Nord Stream and energy exports to Europe and unfreezing them from SWIFT. And that the US is going to have to get some leverage on Europe or work with Europe at least to like get anything done with Russia. So that to me seems to indicate that Europe is going to be able to have a stronger position moving forward, negotiating with the United States. But I mean, who knows? Like you said, it's very volatile right now. It could be that Trump reacts to all this very well or very poorly, or who knows, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the US didn't want Europe at the table because, from a pretty brutal point of view, Europe were not going to help US help themselves to Ukrainian and Russian trade and natural resources and whatnot. So Europe was an obstacle to the US getting what they wanted out of any, like I've said many times, Trump sees this war, he doesn't care one iota for Ukraine. There's no moral or kind of moral political objectives here for the US. They want to literally enrich themselves from this war. And so a hasty end to this war allows them to do trade deals with Russia and to expropriate all sorts of stuff from Ukraine, extort Ukraine over their natural resources, etc., etc. And Europe is the obstacle. So they're frozen out. We don't need you because actually we don't. Yeah, you are a problem for us. But now, as you say, they've found out that if Putin's not going to play ball, they've got a choice. Either they take Russia's side so obviously that they really hammer Ukraine from Russia's point of view, But then that's not going to sit well. And if Europe holds some cards, then the other option is that Trump could just then go the other way against Russia. And let's hope it's the latter.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think the next is the kind of the ceasefire, the whole idea of it. I think it's really unclear. I'll put it this way. My general understanding of the current situation is that there isn't a ceasefire. In other words, you have the United States said everyone needs to do a ceasefire. Ukraine said yes. Russia said yes if you meet these conditions. And some of those conditions are not meetable by the US. They need Europe to do it, and Europe said no. So that, to me, indicates Russia has not agreed to ceasefire yet, and therefore ceasefire has not been in effect. However, I would argue that all countries are kind of saying different things at different times about whether or not the ceasefire is in effect. I'll put it this way. Russia is accusing Ukraine of violating the ceasefire. Ukraine is accusing Russia of violating the ceasefire. The US at various times has claimed the ceasefire is not in effect, but also accused both sides of violating it. So the
and of course this is only the energy infrastructure ceasefire, isn't it? Yeah,
exactly. Yes, that's right. And so I'm just saying, like, the whole situation is so murky there that, to me, I'm going to obviously err on the side of it's not in effect, but it's just been kind of a mess this week in terms of like how it's been reported and what's going on with it. I think I would argue that unless the public, as a person who took a lot of time to try to dissect what's going on, I was pretty confused. So I think a member of the general public is probably very confused about what's going on. They're probably like, Ukraine, wasn't there a ceasefire? I don't know what's going on. So just if you had any thoughts about that before we move on.
Yeah, I mean, goodness me, it is just really confusing. And then you got the Black Sea ceasefire. It was interesting. JD Vance intimated in his speech in Greenland that the energy ceasefire was it was taking place. It was in force now, and that they are almost there with the Black Sea one. So that's the US, that's the vice president seeming to, be in agreement that the ceasefire is in effect the energy one. And in fact, Ukraine has not struck energy infrastructure unless you count the claim about Sudzha gas metering station. But they were hitting these big oil refineries, depots, and transshipment points, and then that has stopped as far as we can see. So they are adhering to the ceasefire. Russia are arguably, Rustem Umerov has apparently got evidence that Russia has broken the ceasefire, and they are taking that to the Americans. That could be why Trump is now annoyed. Maybe Ukrainian evidence is there. But yeah, it seems a bit of a hot mess. And then you have, of course, was it Karasin, one of the Russian negotiators, saying yesterday that it's unlikely that this war is going to come to an end, or the ceasefire is going to come, a much greater ceasefire will come into force before the end of this year. He was saying probably in 2026, maybe by the end of this year. And that goes completely against what the Americans have been saying. By a factor of, well, not a factor, by the amount of like 9 months, right? So, the Russians are saying very, very different things to what the Americans are saying, and then many people were saying, well, previously that no, of course there won't be a ceasefire, and if there is, the Russians will break it, and it's all very unlikely. And I think we are probably in that kind of area of a hot mess where, yeah, it ain't gonna happen. But I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I really couldn't say what the status of the ceasefire is right now. I think it's sort of in effect, I think is maybe the most accurate. Erlend, did you want to add something about this?
No, I just wanted to point out the clearly lack of proof and written statements that are coming out from both Ukraine, Russia, and the US in synchro. Like, there is no clear message coming out from these parties. And then,
ironically, Erlend, they even said, why hasn't a joint statement come out? And all the sides separately blamed each other. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but
talk? Oh, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, I just want to say that's normally what happens when you have a ceasefire. You have maybe they don't speak directly to each other, but normally there is a statement which may not be joint, but at least almost the same writing, and there's nothing like that.
I don't know whether this all just really reflects how, and I'm going to be quite damning here, but how absolutely freaking naive and lacking in in-depth knowledge the US administration and negotiators are. Like I just, when you got Steve Witkoff clearly not understanding the Ukraine conflict, not understanding Ukraine, not knowing the oblast, not knowing, just and parroting Russian talking points. You're right. Okay, here's someone who has a fundamental lack of knowledge of Ukraine and the war in Ukraine. When you've got Donald Trump talking about, oh, we're just looking at reports about Iranian shaheeds being used. It's like, oh, welcome to the war, Trumpy. We've been here for 2.5 years talking about that crap. And you've kind of got just a set of people that are either just overtly parroting Russian talking points or just showing a fundamental lack of ignorance. And there's a naivety in, like, Steve Witkoff. He's a billionaire real estate mogul that plays golf with Trump. That's why he's there. I mean, it's really, is that how you qualified? Pete Hegseth, woefully underqualified. Marco Rubio is a newbie to doing, you're putting Waltz, Rubio, and Witkoff up against bloody, Ushakov and Sergei Lavrov. These guys have been doing this for decades. The Americans getting eaten alive. And I'm sorry to be so harsh about this, but I just think there's just a massive American naivety going on.
I just wanted to ask Artem, what is the perception of the statements, for instance, Witkoff's statements about the oblasts that he thinks are Russian because they're Russian speakers and most people there want to be Russian. How do Ukrainians feel and how did they react to those kind of things?
Well, reaction is very, very bad. And I cannot talk for all Ukrainians, but I am personally thinking that America is trying to strategically switch allegiance, and the reason for that is unknown to me. Whether they really want to cooperate with Russia more, or are they trying to influence Europe and motivate Europe to produce more missiles, tanks, ammunition, and then switch the course again? I don't know. But right now, the perception is really grim.
Yeah, I thought I wanted to ask because you mentioned Witkoff and his statements obviously are very disturbing.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, John.
No, okay.
I was just gonna say, I think the current administration views the war as like an inconvenience or something that was kind of started under Biden, and they don't like it kind of being in their way, something like that. They definitely aren't the first administration in the U.S. to be lured by this idea of we can have a reset of our relations with Russia and we can cooperate on certain key issues that might be in U.S. interest. In other words, if we can get Russia to stop causing damage, it would benefit U.S. interests. I think the actual interests at stake for the U.S. are very intangible in the sense that it has more to do with the international rules-based world order and future security commitments to Europe, and just broader global security that will benefit the U.S. In the future. And so for this administration, which doesn't appear to be thinking in those terms, they're thinking in way different terms. This whole thing doesn't. I don't know. They see it very differently, and they don't have anything. They don't see themselves as having anything at stake here. So they're not really in. They don't have much interest in learning about what's going on and resolving it meaningfully or dealing with it in a really objective way. They're more just get this inconvenience out of our way. Can we use it to our advantage? Maybe cynically, sure. Something like that. It's more those lines of thinking, in my view. And yeah, I don't know. I think we'll see how far it gets them. Again, I try to be objective in my own analysis of what's going on. Personally, I don't think locking Europe out of the whole situation has gotten them very far so far. To me, that didn't make really any sense on the face of it. And to me, it's a blatant contradiction when Russia is making explicit demands to the United States. You need to get Europe to do X, Y, and Z. Otherwise, no peace. The U.S. needs to either talk to Europe or work something out with Europe or whatever to get what it wants done, right? So that's, to me, the fundamental issue with the current U.S. strategy, and it just won't work. The U.S. plan to ignore Europe in the first place was so fundamentally flawed from the beginning that they either need to massively course correct at this point, or they need to, I don't know, like abandon their plan, because it's not going to work. That's kind of just my general opinion of it.
And I think so. The US approach at the moment is very mercantile. It's all about economic, finances, doing deals, these kind of extracting X, Y, and Z from both Russia and Ukraine. But I think when you and Europe, but when you start thinking in these very sort of minor terms, and not in the, so when you're talking before about resets, they were thinking then in far more, like you're saying, abstract terms of geopolitical strategizing and the great powers and this and that. Whereas here's a good example, like Greenland. Right, you've had JD Vance go to Greenland and say, right, you guys are not doing enough. Denmark, you guys are just rubbish. You've been underfunding this, and you haven't been serious about the defense. Interestingly, the US used to have 15,000 people in Greenland. Now they've got 150. They used to have like 20 different bases. Now they've got one. So in fact, the US has done exactly what they accused Denmark of doing, by the way. But they said that you're not doing enough about Greenland because it's really vulnerable to the threats of, guess who? Russia. Okay, so you've just made a big thing about possibly even intimating invading Greenland because of the threats from Russia. And then you're looking over to Ukraine and you're thinking, but you don't see Russia as at all a threat over there because you're pulling out of Ukraine and trying to extort a bunch of hundreds of billions of dollars out of Ukraine. None of this makes sense. There's no like coherence up here because it's all about little things down here, about expansionism here, getting natural resources from there, doing this, doing that, but none of it ties up over here because I think it's just chaotic.
Yeah, I think that's
ran
right.
over.
Go ahead, Colby. Do you want to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think fundamentally Trump is a guy that he believes that he can make a deal with basically anybody, and this is really what drives all of his foreign policy, is that when he looks at any other world leader, no matter who they are, whether they're a dictator or they're democratically elected or somewhere in between, he just believes that he can make a deal with basically anybody, and it is advantageous for him to even negotiate and seek deals with guys like Kim Jong-un, like Putin, like Xi, because from his perspective, why would I take a ideological, antagonistic approach to the United States' relationship with these countries when I can just make a deal with these guys and then we'll solve the problems that way. And obviously he's had fairly mixed success with this approach in the past, mostly not very successful. And he's now sort of running into this reality. And we can see this quite clearly with Iran, where he's been making all this noise about how he wants to deal with Iran. And now he's saying, well, if they don't make a deal, then we're going to bomb them. So
literally within 24 hours of making what could be described as like almost a love letter. Like, I don't want to hurt you, man.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's all him running through the negotiation tactics in his mind, trying to get a position of leverage, to get them to make some sort of deal. And with Russia, obviously the initial approach was not at all conducive. And now we see these reports that he's getting frustrated with the Russians because he doesn't feel like they're negotiating with him in good faith here, which obviously they aren't. So, I mean, I think that, when we're trying to understand what the American approach is, I mean, just, fundamentally, Trump just believes he can make deals with everybody. And then aside from that, his administration is very chaotically staffed. There's a lot of people who are just plain stupid. There are some people who are quite ideological and have their own motivations and their own beliefs about the world. And so there's not a coherent foreign policy vision within the Trump administration. The Biden administration was much more ideologically coherent. Obviously, there are still differences, opinions on specific policy questions, but overall, Biden administration had a very sort of coherent foreign policy vision, which was basically de-escalation of all potential foreign policy crises, is like the number one priority. So we just need to de-escalate. We don't want to have conflict with Russia and China, and the way to do that is to de-escalate rather than sort of upping the ante and getting the enemy to back down. It's the United States is going to be the one to take a step back. But the Trump administration, they don't really have that view on an ideological level, but there's Trump's just desire to seek deals with everybody. And then, guys like Vance have their own motivations and other people have their own views. Obviously, there's this sort of narrative that Russia is this cool based country, which some people in the administration obviously hold, obviously untrue, but that's definitely, a factor as well. But fundamentally, I think Trump is just looking for deals. And I was recently at an interview with Alexander Vindman, and he made the point that he really believes that Trump actually just wants a Nobel Peace Prize. That he sees in Ukraine that there's this ultimate prize. If he can somehow make a peace deal, that he's going to get recognized for that and get his peace prize, and it'll be a real peace prize, not like Obama's fake peace prize for doing nothing. So that's something that he really wants. That's sort of one of the rewards that he sees for himself personally. And the mineral stuff is all sort of even secondary to that. And I would also point out that people need to remember that it was Zelensky who was the first actually to really float this concept of sort of having a deal with critical minerals and Ukraine's natural resources in return for security guarantees. Zelensky wants this, so we shouldn't buy into this narrative that this is entirely just being forced unwillingly on Ukraine. Like Zelensky wants a deal, but it wouldn't look anything.
It wouldn't look anything like the Americans are trying to push on them.
No, not right now. Zelensky's not going to agree to a bad deal, but he does want a deal, and I still believe that there is absolutely room for a realistic deal. Obviously, the United States is not putting that forward right now, but I still think that is actually a possibility.
The evolution went from really bad deal and trying to extract $500 billion, if you remember, right at the beginning. Then they rewrote it, and that was the one they were going to sign in the White House. And then it all went wrong in the White House. And then people were saying I was saying it very publicly that was a good deal for Ukraine. And the Americans the White House caught onto this. Everyone's saying, I think that Zelensky's played a blinder here. That's going to be a good deal. So then they went away, right, let's rewrite it back to the old version, but make it even worse. And that's kind of where we're at now. So it's just like, seeming to go from one polar opposite to the other. But I think you're absolutely right. So Trump is, I think, just a real estate mogul that's trying to do very parochial, small-time mafioso type deals where, he's a bully boy trying to he just sees everything transactionally and in that bullying kind of way. But I think, and I'm sorry, I've said, for my audience, if any of them out there listening, I say this every day, so apologies for repeating myself, but Trump is fundamentally ignorant, like truly fundamentally ignorant. Like he doesn't read, he doesn't take intelligence briefings. So okay, where are you getting your information from? Like I've read something like 15 books on like this war and the history of Russia and Ukraine in order to help. And I read like dozens of things a day, like all the 12 hours a day on my head's in this war. Like Trump won't have read anything on the Ukraine war in preparation for becoming the president. And when he goes, and it's really interesting to listen to Fiona Hill, she talks about in the first administration, when she was on the phone call with him or at meetings with him, she said he was deeply unprepared, that he would go into meetings and it would just be about like the personality, and he would be trying to connect on a personal front, but there's no ideology because he doesn't really have that ideology other than like, I want to take advantage of you if you're a smaller nation, or I kind of we'll be big boys together, or whatever it is. There's a really simplistic understanding of geopolitics, but actually he's super unprepared, and I think he's fundamentally ignorant, and so that allows him to be taken advantage of by people like Russia, but also people in his inner circle who do have ideology, and so on and so forth. So yeah, an awful lot of agreement with you there, Colby.
One of the reasons why I think Trump is going to be largely unsuccessful in his endeavors to get through some sort of peace deal is because for Ukraine and for Russia, for whatever crazy reasons they have, this is very complex, and there are so many levels to what is happening right now. And for that to stop, you need very precise measures that they either will force Russians to comply, or for Ukraine to feel secure. And for Ukraine to feel secure and accept a peace deal, that is not something you can just throw ideas into the air. If that does happen, that will be an absolutely extraordinary coincidence. But there are so many levels to this war that I don't think it's actually doable if you don't learn and listen to the Ukrainians and understand. Then I don't see how they will succeed in this. It's really difficult for me to understand what their aim is. But when you're saying that they're just ignorant and they don't understand it, that makes more sense.
I mean, right from what Colby was saying about Nobel Peace Prize, he just listen to Trump. He talks about it all the time and has done for years. So it's definitely on his mind. He really genuinely wants a Nobel Peace Prize. That's not that's self-evident. But then listen to the words he said about Ukraine, and virtually everything he says about Ukraine is categorically incorrect. Right? There are thousands of troops surrounded. No, they're not. The country is in rubble. Every city's been rubbleized. 20% of Kyiv, I think, was it 20% is left or 20% is in rubble? No, all of that is rubbish. Like, you need to go there. You need to listen to the people, to Ukrainians, maybe. That'd be a good start. And you need to do some research, because everything you say is untrue about Ukraine. And that is just... it's just a case of therefore parroting Russian talking points. And then when he's now put, or his team has put, Tim Pool into the White House press pool, like Tim Pool, the guy that took money from Tenet Media to spurt Russian propaganda, the guy that's clearly not a journalist, the guy that is just an absolute wingnut, he's in a White House press pool. It just beggars belief. It's just the whole administration is just chaotic and nuts and ideologically mental in some areas, and then ideologically vacuous in other areas. I think Trump is actually the vacuous one, but the problem is he can then be easily filled up with other people's ideology. And anyway, just insane stuff going on.
Yeah, I think Putin's really done a good job playing into that personality-based perception of the world that Trump
100%.
sees, right? Where he first off automatically already had coming in this, fake tough guy image that he's been building up for decades, through his own media machine. But beyond that, like, we have this story with George Bush, right? That he allegedly got a report from the KGB that George Bush was like a born-again Christian and that he was really religious, and that he basically told George Bush like a made-up story that was like, my mother's house burned down, and this cross was the only thing that survived, and ever since then I've been a Christian, and all that. And that really wooed George Bush over.
Yeah.
So we don't know what happened with Trump. It was much more private about what exactly was exchanged between them. But based on that history, I can imagine that Putin has gone to great lengths to learn about what Trump is impressed by, and he's done his best to fit the mold of someone who Trump would want to be, for lack of a better term, friends with and make a deal with. And I think it seems like that's part of why Trump, when asked about Putin, Trump seems to be like under a lot of impressions that they get along really well and that he's able to make a deal with this guy. And like, you don't understand like I do, and he's going to listen to me, and he won't break a deal that I make with him, these types of things. And I think a lot of that has to do with probably Putin's ability to convince Trump that he's, someone he can work with. I assume there are other things going on, obviously, between them, but I think that's part of it too.
What do you think, Jonathan, about the pace of Europe reacting to this? Because we've obviously seen Germany finally, stepping up with the lifting of the debt brake and announcing a lot of new programs in defense and also more aid to Ukraine. I'm finally proud of Norway being the largest European contributor for 2025 in terms of money to Ukraine. It's still not enough. We should give them at least double, in my opinion, but that's another question. Denmark is ramping up. Sweden increased their budget for Ukraine substantially this year. UK is doing more, not enough. But the reaction is there. Is it enough? Do you think?
I mean, it's the hope that Ukraine has. Europe, it really is the hope at the moment, unless Trump really does get properly pissed off with Putin. But there seems to be unity, and then at these key points, it all kind of falls apart a bit. So we had Ursula von der Leyen with the 150 billion euros rearm Europe, or readiness 2030. But then you had Italy, Spain, and maybe France as well. Then put the kibosh on that. The problem is that every nation has its own fiscal problems, and that is going to, when it comes to huge expenditure on defense and helping Ukraine, that's the most difficult thing to sell to a domestic electorate, that you need to vote you back in anywhere between like now and 4 years time. And so all these different European nations are going to be having to balance domestic requirements to spend a lot of money internally, and knowing that it's existential for Europe to spend that money out. I think everyone realizes in a perfect world, they're just, we'll back Ukraine 100%, it'll be done. Like, UK's are really fascinating. Sorry to be a bit UK centric here, but Brexit has screwed us, because we are now a political football between the EU and the US. The US is now threatening us, or not threatening us, has put tariffs on us. We can't retaliate because we're not big enough, but we are in a financial black hole at the moment in the UK, and we need to spend more on defense, which we have pledged, but we've got no money, and it's looking worse and worse. And then we hear today, or over the last week, that we have a tax on tech, big tech from America, that now they've been lobbying the US. The US is threatening to put bigger tariffs on us unless we get rid of that tech tax, which will screw us even more financially, but we are powerless to do anything about it. So we don't have the security blanket of Europe, and then that means that there's a fractured unity, because we'd be in a better position to, we're spending 100 billion pounds a year servicing our debt. Loads of countries like France are heavily indebted, I think Italy as well. So that's why a lot of these countries are saying great to Ursula von der Leyen's suggestions, but actually we're really heavily indebted, and most of this is about borrowing money, albeit quite cheaply, but it's just very difficult. And so I think there is an abstract unity there. There's a political unity there, but it's like herding cats when everyone has their own domestic issues to deal with. And most of that is going to be revolving around how much money can we put towards this. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah. Do you see a shift from south to north in basically raw power and also economical power? Because we see the Scandinavian countries and the Baltic, Poland, Germany ramping up their defense spending and domestic production. Also, the Netherlands are investing in their military, and then France. Yes, little bit, but there are incremental increases in their defense spending. The UK is doing what it seems to be able to, but France, Italy, Spain, Portugal, not really reacting, are they?
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting. I was looking at just Twitter, going through my Twitter feed, my curated list feed today, and Alexander Stubb is all over the shop. Like, he's every fifth bloody tweet. But that's interesting. So he goes and plays golf with Trump, knows how to get close to Trump, play golf with him, win a golf tournament. Absolutely brilliant. But I think it shows you that the Nordic countries are now, Denmark with Greenland, they're much more in the limelight. I don't know whether this translates to raw power, though, inside the EU. Like, Poland have long been touted as this growing. I mean, their economy has been doing exceptionally well. That has possibly been what's behind their spending an absolute ton of money on defense and getting an awful lot of kit. But I mean, the challenge for the Nordic nations, the Scandinavian nations, and the Baltic nations is just size of population. And therefore, how much power can they wield in Europe? It's interesting that Kaja Kallas, who I've got a lot of time for in terms of her position on Ukraine, the former Estonian Prime Minister, who is now, I forget her title in the EU, but she's pretty important. But there's been a bit of a backlash against her because they've seen her as too moral, too supporting, too bellicose almost in supporting Ukraine. And so there is this division. The Financial Times did an interesting article where they looked at the amount of aid to Ukraine correlating with the distance from Moscow that country is. So the closer to Moscow, the more, and obviously, the more aid has been given. So Spain, Italy, Portugal, etc., giving less and less. So there are issues in Europe we need that unity. It's almost there, but you know, we really need to ramp up, and I think we need to be at the negotiation table, and the US. I don't know whether Ukraine can force Europe to the table and just say to the US, look, we're not doing this unless Europe's here. It would be nice if there's that kind of strength. I mean, I've got a lot to say about Macron and Starmer because I think they've done a really good job to muscle themselves into very, very important positions in international geopolitics and in the war in Ukraine. But yeah.
And then finally, before we end with the Europe discussion, do you think this can actually force Great Britain back into the EU?
Yeah, I noticed someone just asked that in the thread, and so the problem with the UK is that the Labour government that came in were absolutely banking on economic growth to balance the budget effectively. We don't want to borrow more because we're spending an awful lot on servicing that, and you can't like rob Peter to pay Paul. We just need to generate more tax income, and we don't want to. That was it. We didn't want to higher taxes. That was a big thing because our tax burden is pretty high. It's one of the highest it's been, right, for donkey's years. And so the only way is just to grow the economy. But it's really difficult to grow the economy when our biggest trade partners biggest trade partner is the EU. And we have opted out of the EU, and in order to sell stuff into the EU, we need to pay tariffs and do loads of paperwork, and it's deeply inefficient. Like I've got a very conservative friend who drove a truck out to Ukraine with me, who's like blue through and through, but he was former forces. He's come out of the forces, has a couple of businesses, and he is like, one of my businesses, like, we were absolutely screwed by coming out the EU. Just like, we lost all our European trade like that. So, whatever you believe about Brexit, and it's very divisive in the UK, but actually people are realizing more and more now that economically, aside from anything else like immigration, but economically, Leave was never going to win the Brexit debate. Like, it's insane to opt out of a trading block of 500 million to be 70 million outside 500. How are you going to attract inward investment into the UK where they would have to pay to access 500 million? So you'd rather, if you're an international entity, set up an EU where you have free access to 500 million people and have to pay to access 70 million people. You're never going to set up in the UK to have free access to 70 million people and pay to access 500 million people. So just mathematically, like economically, it was kind of suicidal to get out the EU. So I think they're now realizing this, but it's still kind of divisive. So I think you're going to see Keir Starmer get closer and closer to the EU. First of all, they're going to use defence and doing a strategic defence agreement and alignment with the EU, and that gives a way into just doing things a lot more closely, and maybe getting some kind of customs arrangement, maybe some kind of Norway deal. I don't know. The free movement of people would probably be a big sticking point because that I think drove a lot of the Leave vote. Anyway, so yes, I think we will have to entertain seriously getting back in once enough people from Leave have died. And I say that not as a joke, actually, because a lot of the polls have shifted as younger people got older, and a lot of the older people who did vote Leave have literally died. So there is a cohort change.
We all die, so
yeah.
It's not bad to talk about that. But yeah, I mean, it would be an absolute bombshell also for the Americans if the UK got back in. I would be super happy, and I'm embarrassed that Norway is not in, but at least we are in the unitary market, and free movement of people and labor is something that is benefiting us to a great extent, and I think that would probably grow the UK economy pretty fast if you get back in. Joseph.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, I've got a way that the UK could balance their budgets. First, every country that's ever been nice to you, you threaten them with tariffs unless they give you money.
Yeah.
Erlend,
yeah.
We just have one item left in the extra bits, and I know you enjoyed this as well. There's a pipe that was consecrated in Russia this week. And do you want to pull it up, Erlend?
You have Vatnik, and then you have Pipenik, and apparently the Russians likes to be inside pipes.
So yeah, this is just like basically in Kursk, there's a story that they have that like a bunch of Russian special forces crawled into some pipes to like, you know, do something like a bad action movie, and they made a monument to it in Yekaterinburg, and they like blessed it, and it's, you know, it's funny, but it also points to that the Russian Orthodox Church has increasingly become a associated and directly responsible for like promoting the war and promoting loyalty to the militaristic aspects of the state. They're, you know, actively involved in this type of activity where they bless tanks and they commemorate, you know, reenactments of things and things like that.
But it was insanely embarrassing, that whole pipe. Like some claims are like up to 800 people died, but you see some of the lung x-rays of people that are now experiencing huge health issues that were in those who survived coming out of the pipelines. These were like otherwise utilized gas pipelines until somewhat, you know, recently. Just incredibly dangerous. If the people weren't killed by the MLRS, the artillery, the drones, and being shot as they came out of it, then the ones that were in there and then got back out the other end, it was just huge and embarrassing for the Russians. And now they're you know, consecrating it. Mad.
I mean,
Yeah,
I just
chances are
want
they're
to
consecrating
pull up.
it.
I
A
just
lot of
want to pull
people
up this
died.
one. Joseph, you did this one as well this week.
Yes, I've been gibelifying things.
So I mean that kind of rhymes well with what happened in the beginning of the war as well, and this iconic video of a Ukrainian soldier being interviewed in a trench, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these are the pictures of the week. There's a different one. And then this one is absolutely amazing. Joseph, you did one there.
Awesome.
I made too many. I kept trying to stop, but I couldn't stop.
Are there any final points from anyone before we end the stream?
Just how awesome Scandinavia is. I think Stephen Bendal is in the chat, but Erlend, I spoke to one of your countrymen the other day in a live stream talking about, you know, the position of Norway and how much they're doing and how much more they could do, and the sovereign wealth fund. It's just going to be fascinating to see the relationship between, as you mentioned earlier, the sort of Baltics and Scandinavia inside the EU, and the power shifts potentially in the EU that might take place, and how there are so many other nations that are kind of standing up. This Ukraine war has given them the opportunity. Weirdly, I suppose the silver lining for some of these nations is that they are standing up and being counted inside Europe, and it's fascinating. And there is a bit of a divide that you can draw kind of across Europe at the moment, north to south, that I think is interesting, and even east to west.
Yeah, it's definitely connecting Scandinavia more with Eastern Europe, which we were very disconnected from Eastern Europe before. So that's a big shift. It's interesting to follow, and also I think it brings a lot of positive things to us, a lot of positive effect. Labor that we dearly need is flowing into our country, and yeah, it's good. And also, we had a cancellation today. So Lorem Ipsum was supposed to talk about a very interesting subject, basically the financing models and the financial markets in Europe for, in relation with the Rearm Europe program. And I hope we can do that next Sunday. I think that's super interesting because he has a lot of ideas and knowledge about these financial markets and how they work in Europe and not work. That's one of the issues. Apparently, we are really bad at state bonds in Europe, and so every time we need them, we go to the Americans. So yeah, he has. I hope we can do that next Sunday.
You don't want to go to us?
What?
You don't want to go to us right now?
Go to?
for bonds. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, you got yeah. It's interesting because there are some like Canada and Japan possibly was it as well, selling a load of US bonds and whatnot. And yeah, bonds are an interesting thing right now, I guess.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
we can be participating in this as well. I know the European Union has asked Norway if we want to be financing some of this.
Well, someone said to me the other day, Erlend, actually, when we're talking, I was talking in the same way I just have about the UK being in financial trouble. And someone was saying, I thought, that's an interesting idea. We could go to Norway and say, do some bilateral agreement whereby it'll be like, can we borrow really cheaply, just an absolute ton of money? I mean, you've just made, I don't know, however many billion out of the Ukraine war due to the prices of oil and gas with the North Sea and sovereign wealth fund. You know, can you bail us out, Norway, and then do some kind of close relationship, have some close relationship with Norway, economic, kind of you're in the EU but not, and that could be our way into getting closer to the EU. And I just thought, yeah, it'd be nice to get close to Norway. You're our neighbours, but that sea seems to be much bigger than it really actually is.
I know that our government tries to have very close ties to the UK, both economically and also when it comes to visas. Like Europeans cannot easily get visas in the UK now as they could before, but Norwegians can, etc. And that's, so we actually, there's a very interesting thing because there was a bilateral visa-free treaty from before the existence of the Schengen agreement. I think it's dating even back maybe before the Second World War. It's very old, and that is now the basis of a new treaty. So it's just an updated treaty, and there's a visa-free thing between Norway and the UK.
Let's do it. I really want to go to Norway. So yeah, let's do it.
Great. Okay.
All I know is all of you up there speak suspiciously good English. I don't know what that's about, but good job.
Well, it's because secretly they all want to be English. Really, I mean, everyone does, right? I mean, we know, everyone knows this. Like, you're just afraid to admit it. And really, for you Americans out there, you know that the Boston Tea Party was a mistake, and you really want to be back at home, don't you? So anyway, when you guys have a revolution again and it all goes tits up, you can just give us a call, and we're like, okay, we'll come and sort you out. It's not a problem.
I thought King Charles was about to fix that issue.
Yeah, first we've got to sort out Canada. I mean, Colby will be fine with that. So, we really get Canada back in, make sure the Union flag is in the corner of the Canadian flag more formally, and then we'll worry about the US and, get those colonies back and the British Empire 2.0. Let's do it. I'm keen.
Yeah, there was like a weird random piece of news where it was like alleged that King Charles offered Trump to go join the Commonwealth, and Trump said like maybe. So that'd be amazing if we just randomly joined the Commonwealth.
If he didn't really understand it, I've signed up for this thing called the Commonwealth. Like, we're going to get loads of wealth, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And by the way, you're no longer head of state.
Yeah. And you're sacked.
Oh,
awesome.
Yes.
You're fired. Yeah, love it.
Anyways, thank you so much for joining, Jonathan. This was great. And also thank you really much for Artem's debut on the stream. I hope there will be more of these talks on the stream about Counter-UAS Ukrainian style.
Awesome stuff.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks to, of course, our regular panelists. Thanks to Erlend. Thanks to Colby. Thanks to Gao. Gao's always asking me to thank myself. I think it's weird, but thank you, me. And yeah, of course, thanks to chat. You guys, we always appreciate your questions and your feedback. It really helps us understand what you need to know about what's going on. Of course, everyone who watches after the fact, we know you can't always tune in live, so thanks for tuning in later. Thanks for liking, subscribing, and all that. Check out, of course, ATP Geopolitics. It's a fantastic channel. I feel like most of you guys are over here because of him, not the other way around. So feels weird promoting him, but we obviously should. So, of course, it's a great channel. We appreciate all the work you do, Jonathan. And
thanks for the invite.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for stopping by. you're welcome anytime. And if you ever want to have any of us on, because you need some to fill some time, we're more than happy to help you out.
Honestly, just I'm so busy like talking on 57 different platforms with like 1 million different people, but just hit me up and say, I fancy coming on your show this week. And I'll almost certainly go, yep, that's cool. When's a good time? So Joseph, you are probably the only guy that hasn't been on out of everyone. So, please do come on.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, but we also have a lot of researchers who are just quietly plugging away at things in the old basement or wherever. So we'll try to throw them your way if they write an article or whatnot. But
legends,
yeah, always appreciate your support of Tochnyi. You've been an early, long time supporter. Appreciate that. Appreciate everyone from your audience who has supported us because of you. And we'll definitely see you around. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. We'll see everybody next week. Slava Ukraini.
Heroem Slava.
Heroem Slava.
On behalf of the brave.